respected teachers, faculty, seniors, and my dear colleagues. Today I would be presenting a case of congenital goiter. Uh, the index case's mother, who was a 24-year-old female diagnosed with twin conception at 34 weeks of gestation, was referred for safe confinement in view of antenatally diagnosed congenital goiter in one of the twin fetuses. The conception was out of third degree consanguinity, second gravida, second para. The first child, which was born around 3 years prior to the current conception, died at 7 months of age because of biliary atresia. Currently, the twins were dichorionic diamniotic, that is, the non identical twins. There was no significant past medical illness or past drug history for the mother prior to gestation or during the gestation. Anomaly scan at 19 weeks of gestation showed hyperechoic anterior neck mass in fetus 1. Mother was actually counseled for an expert opinion at 20 weeks of gestation. However, patient failed to follow up and came at 34 weeks to our center. On biochemical evaluation, the mother was biochemically euthyroid. Anti-TPO antibody, anti-TSH receptor antibodies were negative. We did a fetal MRI at 36 weeks of gestation, which confirmed the thyroid enlargement with mild compression of larynx, trachea in one of the fetuses. Here we can see the T1 weighted image, which is a cross-sectional image, which is showing a hyperintense goiter. This is the T2 weighted image, which is the coronal section, which is again showing a hypointense goiter. And the third image is again a T2 weighted image, which is a sagittal image, which is showing a hypointense goiter. The red arrow is the trachea, which had a patency of around 5 to 6 mm. An elective LSCS was planned at 36 weeks and 6 days of gestation. The exit was not planned in the current case because there was no significant airway compromise on an MRI. Considering a high-risk delivery, 5 NRP trained personnel were kept standby. However, the delivery was uneventful, and both the twins were boys. Both of them cried immediately after birth. The birth weight of twin 1 was 2.32 kg, which is our index case, and the baby required a temporary CPAP support in the OR. However, the baby was transitioned to mother's side and did not require any NICU care. The baby, the index case or the twin 1, had coarse faces, dry skin, and a palpable goiter was appreciated. The TFT, which was done on day 1, showed a TSH more than 495 with a free T4 of 0.41. The baby was started on levothyroxine 25 microgram on day 1 of life. After starting levothyroxine, the day 4 TFT showed a significant improvement in free T4 to 1.13. A 2D echo done during the third day of life showed a tiny PFO. However, the hearing screening was normal. An ultrasound scan for the baby done on day 3 showed a right lobe of thyroid measuring 2.4 cc, left lobe measuring 3 cc. However, as we can see in the ultrasound scan, there is a diffuse thyromegaly with normal echogenicity with no focal lesions. The tracheal lumen, which we can appreciate here, was 6 by 8 mm. 6 by 8 mm. A technetium thyroid scan, which was done, showed a diffusely increased uptake, which was favoring thyromegaly. Hence, we kept a final diagnosis of congenital goiter with hypothyroidism, the most probable etiology being this hormonogenesis, as we will discuss in further slides. Twin 2, which was apparently a normal child, had no significant features suggestive of thyroid dysfunction.
Excuse me, Dr. Krishna. Can
Yes,
you just minimize the black screen which is coming over there on your screen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. However, the day 1 TFT, which done for the twin 2, showed a significantly low free T4. Considering the other twin, which was diagnosed to have congenital hypothyroidism, we erred on treating this twin on day 1 with 25 microgram of levothyroxine. However, on repeating a TFT, it showed a free T4 which was above the upper limit of normal, and we stopped the therapy on the day 4. We repeated TFT of this second twin serially every weekly for the first 2 weeks and then monthly, which is showing a euthyroid status. Ultrasound scan and a technetium 99 thyroid scan showed a normal thyroid gland at a eutopic position. So coming back to our index case or the twin 1, this is the 4 months of follow-up. As we can see, the TSH has come down to normal on day 26 of gestation, which has remained normal up till the last follow-up at day 119. Free T4 normalized on day 4 of life, which has been normal till the last follow-up. However, as we can see, the thyroxine requirement for the baby has decreased as the child is growing. Clinically, the baby has normal developmental milestones. There are no hearing or cardiac anomaly detected on screening, and we have planned for genetic studies for the baby, considering that the goiter size is decreasing and the baby is requiring low doses of thyroxine as per the age. The weight for age for our index case, height length for age for our index case, and the head circumference for age for the case has been appropriately progressing as per the corrected gestational age. Coming to the discussion, congenital hypothyroidism, according to the world literature, the incidence is 1 in 3,000 to 4,000 births. Out of these babies, around 10 to 15% of fetuses present with congenital goiter. That makes the estimated prevalence of congenital goiter being 1 in 30,000 to 50,000 live births. However, we do not have an Indian data on congenital prevalence of congenital goiter, but the prevalence of congenital hypothyroidism, as per the ICMR study from 2007 to 2012, states the incidence of congenital hypothyroidism in Indian babies being 1 in 1130 live births. Now, the first question arises, why should we be concerned about congenital goiter? Congenital goiter has two ramifications, one being the functional component, other being the structural component. Functional being the baby would be either hypothyroid or hyperthyroid. There are few cases of euthyroid goiters as well. But more importantly, the structural component, which may cause the compression of trachea and may lead to airway compromise, or esophageal compression, which can lead to polyhydramnios. The second question that arises is what could have been the... Hello? Yes, sir.
Before you go to the discussion, can we have some questions on the clinical aspects?
Okay, sir.
Or some discussion on the clinical aspects. First of all, I should say that it was very astute of the ultrasonographer to pick up the fetal goiter, and I've seen occasions when this important finding has been missed, and there are occasions when we specifically look for fetal goiter, especially when the pregnant mother, is a case of autoimmune thyroiditis. Yes. And there we are paying attention to ultrasound. We do that to rule out the presence of a fetal goiter, and so that necessary action could be taken. But in this case, I'm glad this was picked up by the ultrasonographer, and you could also prepare for the baby yes. to be born, and you had very nicely prepared the team to face the situation. There is one question which I wanted to ask. The twin 2 had a high TSH, which is only 30, which is possible on day 1, but do you have any explanation for the low free T4?
Sir, maybe the timing of the sampling would have been there, or maybe the free T4, as we know, is a little difficult to measure as compared to total T4. So it could have been a lab error, sir. So these are the two things. I want
to say free T4 is a little fussy assay.
Yes, and sir. Yes, sir.
Whether that may be the reason, but 30 can be explained. As you all know, yes, there is a surge
yes, sir.
In the neonatal period immediately after birth. It starts
yes, sir.
in 20 minutes, 30 minutes after birth, and that is the welcome to the world at large for the baby. And there is a sudden surge, and it can be up to 80 microunits per ml. And this is what I wanted to say. And I don't know whether there are any questions from the audience. on the clinical features. The one other question is about genetics, which I'll ask you later. You can now proceed with the discussion unless there are some questions from the audience.
Sir, there is a question asked by the, was COD TSH screening was considered?
Obviously.
Yes. As
Well,
will, ma'am,
the TSH should be done at birth, whether it is COD or venous blood sample from heel prick. That's an option purely at the center, I think.
Yes, sir.
Any other question? Yeah, you can proceed now.
Yes, sir. Sure.
So there are a couple of questions actually. There is a question which is, was there consideration for intraamniotic treatment with levothyroxine? This is a question from Dr. Wasna.
Yes, sir. Actually, intraamniotic treatment, as we'll discuss, has few case reports and case series have been reported, but unfortunately, the mother came at 34 weeks of gestation, sir, and fetal MRI did not show a significant tracheal compression or polyhydramnios. So, considering the risks associated with intraamniotic LT4, we decided against going that after considering these clinical scenarios, sir.
I might also answer that question. We usually consider intraamniotic assay for thyroid function test when the mother's antibodies are very high. I have had a patient who was pregnant, and during pregnancy her thyroid antibody levels were very high, and fetal goiter was also noticed, and the fetal goiter was also seen to be increasing in size. In such a case, we have done intraamniotic assessment, but we need a very experienced ultrasonographer to do that, and I was fortunate to have one. Otherwise, it could be risky, which Dr. Krishna will be discussing later. And in our patient, we did get T3, and we gave it intraamniotic, and pregnancy proceeded well. And when the baby was born, baby was hypothyroid with a high level of antibody. But in 3 months, when the baby was treated, but in 3 months, the baby became euthyroid, and baby did not have any antibodies left.
There's one more question, sir. Whether the coarse skin in this case indicates symptomatic hypothyroidism at birth.
Krishna?
Yes, sir. Apart from that, there were other features as well as coarse skin, facial features. So, probability of biochemical hypothyroidism at birth was definitely considered, sir, on day 1.
Unfortunately, Krishna doesn't have a clinical picture. If I can show a clinical picture of a neonatal goiter, which I had seen, I would like to share the slide. Can I do that?
Yes, sir.
Share.
Dr. Krishna, you have to stop the share, please.
Sir, I just stopped it, sir.
Now it's okay.
Yes, sir.
Can you all see?
Yes, sir.
This is the patient I had some years ago with massive goiter in the newborn period soon after birth. And you can see there are features of coarse skin and all that. And obviously hypothyroid. And that probably answers your question. And these were the biochemical findings at birth and also after 3 weeks of treatment. I usually do TSH in dilution, and you can see it is more than 1,000, and it reversed to normal in 3 weeks' time with birth. I always do perchlorate discharge test on nuclear scanning, and this showed active discharge of the radioiodine that was given. And you can see that the thyroid is disappearing. The radioactive tracer is disappearing because it's all discharged from the thyroid. And another patient with neonatal goiter, but this is not as severe as the previous one. And this was also biochemically very active case of hypothyroidism. And this is the perchlorate discharge test. If it is normal, there is no discharge at all. You can see the tracer staying the same. It is not diminishing in intensity, and this line is absolutely horizontal. That's all that I want to show. How do I get out?
Stop sharing the screen, sir. The arrow mark thing you have to close.
The same point where you started sharing, sir.
Okay.
One upward arrow mark with an X will be there, sir. You just have to stop.
Sharing is paused.
Yes. Krishna, you can complete your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. So, as sir alluded, coming to the etiology of a congenital goiter in our case, a neonate with goiter with hypothyroidism, these are the 4 common etiologies, being maternal iodine deficiency, iodine excess, exposure to maternal antithyroid drugs during the gestation, and dyshormonogenesis. However, we need to keep one thing in mind, that the other twin was absolutely normal. So both the twins shared the same womb, same maternal factors, and same environmental factors. So the second twin acted as a control for our index case, ruling out the clinical possibility of these 3, that is iodine excess, iodine deficiency, or exposure to maternal antithyroid drugs. And most probably etiology was dyshormonogenesis in our case. When we discuss about the causes of dyshormonogenesis, as we can see, the normal thyroid physiology, that is the sodium iodide supporter, followed by the apical iodide efflux channels. Along with that, there is the deox A2 and deox 2, which leads to the production of H2O2, which in turn helps in oxidation of iodide, which in turn followed by TPO, that is the thyroperoxidase, which leads to oxidation followed by coupling to thyroglobulin. So these are the 7 genetic genes which are which would be mutated in case of thyroid hormone dysgenesis, thyroid hormone dyshormonogenesis. And coming to our last question, that is when and how should have we intervened? As one of our participants asked, to note the fetal thyroid status, the gold standard is chordosynthesis. However, chordosynthesis is associated, it requires a lot of expertise, and it is associated with morbidity. The second in choice comes amniocentesis. However, amniocentesis comes with 2 caveats. As we know that the maternal T4 crosses the placenta, and the amniotic T4 may not be the right marker of the exact fetal T4 levels, as it would be the mixture of fetal as well as maternal T4. However, TSH does not cross the placenta. So TSH may be much more representative of the fetal origin rather than maternal. However, there is one more caveat here, that in case of large goiter with compression of esophagus, there would be polyhydramnios, which may lead to dilution of the TSH and falsely low value. And coming to the second part, that is the possibility of an intraamniotic thyroxine therapy. there are case reports, anecdotal experiences, and few case series which report that intraamniotic thyroxine therapy definitely reduces the size of goiter, which in turn decreases the mass effect and polyhydramnios. However, most of the cases have reported that there was no major effect on normalization of thyroid functions at birth, and most of the babies born with congenital hypothyroidism. And there is one more caveat here, that because of the rarity of the condition and very few limited data, there is no standard dose regimen, duration from the delivery, and optimal monitoring guidelines available for the same. So I would like to conclude by saying that congenital goiter is a rare entity. Even rarely it may be transient. It may impose a significant perinatal complications like airway compression. Role of intraamniotic thyroxine is has been considered in many cases. However, there is a paucity of guidelines in view of the rarity of the condition, and long-term clinical follow-up like clinical, biochemical, and developmental assessment, as in any other case of congenital hypothyroidism, is imperative in cases of congenital goiter, and genetic studies may play a key role in identifying the association and prognosis of the index case as well as the future pregnancies for the couple. I would like to acknowledge our neonatology team, fetal medicine team, and endocrine department for their support. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hello.
Dr. Krishna.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any questions?
I think we have answered most of the questions in the chat, sir. Dr.
I just want to ask
Yes, sir.
Dr. Krishna, what
Yes, yes, sir.
Studies would you like to carry out in this case? What particular genes are you looking for?
Sir, for thyroid hormone dysharmonogenesis, there are generally 7 genes that we look for. That is the sodium iodine sympator, that is the SLC5A5 gene, sir. Apical iodide efflux gene, which is the pendrin gene, which is also associated with the Pendrid syndrome, as we are aware of, sir. The other one being the DUX-A2 and the DUX2 gene. These are actually reported in highest number of cases in southeastern case series, and many of them are reversible hypothyroidism. The other genes, as we have highlighted, sir, the TPO gene, thyroglobulin gene, and iodotyrosine dehalogenase genes has to be considered for genetic analysis in such cases, sir.
Yeah, that covers all the genetic aspect.
There's a question from Dr. Ahila, sir. Did the team have to be ready with any special protocol for intervention? So can you guide about what precautions would be necessary at the time of delivery of such a baby?
Krishna?
Sir, actually, as we know, there is a exit procedure wherein it's a ex utero intrapartum delivery of the baby, sir, wherein still till the placenta is during the C-section, when the placenta is not detached from the uterus, we try to secure the airway of the neonate, sir. So that is generally done when an airway compromise is generally suspected, sir. So that is one of the important steps that has to be considered, sir.
I think you have already mentioned, and it's good to be prepared for any contingency that may arise during the delivery. Thanks, Dr. Krishna, for a nice presentation, for an interesting case.
I would like a few comments from the expert speakers. Dr. Sriram has replied in a message. Sir, would you like to add a few points?
No.
Dr. Sriram.
I think Professor Raghupati sir is there and we are all learning from him, and no special comments. Only thing is like what he already mentioned, we have had at least a couple of occasions to measure the intra-amniotic thyroxine. Maybe you can call it exploratory, but one nice thing happened a couple of years back before Corona started here is one similar baby intra-amniotic thyroxine was administered in the Mediscan group in Chennai. They do really high-risk procedures in antenatal mothers, and we had a very rewarding experience of the goiter reducing in size within a couple of weeks. So that was documented. And one interesting thing which the senior sonologist and the radiologist in Mediscan shared is you can do during the ultrasound you can see the swallowing, and you can record the video of the baby, the compromise, whether the esophagus, that was all shown very nicely in that case. I distinctly remember. This is just an anecdotal rare thing. And incidentally, they shared that at least 10 or 15 cases in the last 2 decades they have done intra-amniotic thyroxine. That is, the IV thyroxine itself is very costly. Just what we always run helter-skelter to in a thyroid myxedema coma case, that was somehow procured and given intra-amniotic in these children. It's not easily available in India, as you know, the IV thyroxine preparation.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ari, would you like to share your experience in the management of congenital goiter, intra-amniotic thyroxine therapy?
Sure. First of all, I just want to say that was a really lovely presentation. I really liked I think your insight about the other twin being a control for environmental causes, I think was quite nice. I would just echo what the other moderators and experts have said, which is that this is not that common, and I found that in the occasions when it arises, we are always sort of scrambling to remember what we did the last time in terms of, if we're considering intra-amniotic treatment, what kind of dose did we use and how often, and there really is not a very well-established protocol. And so I think it really is a case by case and depends heavily, as you said, on the expertise of the sonographers and the folks who are able to administer and monitor. So I personally agree. I probably would not have treated this child with intra-amniotic levothyroxine, but I think that it has been used and it can be effective, mostly for just preventing airway compromise. Not necessarily. There's certainly no outcome data to suggest that it improves outcome. The other thing I was just going to add is, we all are interested in genetic etiologies, and there's been quite a bit of data, as you've mentioned, in the last number of years about genetic causes of these cases. I would say from a clinical standpoint, I have been not as, I tend not to order genetic testing on these patients who have no syndromic features, simply because I don't find that it really informs management that much. The patients are treated the same way. We talk about informing future pregnancies, but the reality is that I think, at least in our country, there are very few families who would even consider altering their plans for pregnancy based on this treatable condition. And so I have not pursued a lot of in-depth genetic investigations other than to recognize that the risk is somewhat higher in future pregnancies, probably around 1 in 4 if it's a recessive cause. So I'll stop there, but I think it was a very nice talk.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Sriram, sir, would you?
Yeah, as Professor Raghupati sir was mentioning, I was just thinking today the mothers are screened almost universally for thyroid dysfunction in the first visit, and very often we see some degree of hypothyroidism in many mothers, and in the next visit many times antibodies are tested, and as sir pointed out, some of these mothers come back in the second visit with a report of very high titers. And I don't know whether now, as sir was saying, to write a note to the sonologist during the anomaly scan to look carefully for goitering, because then the incidence will go very high. And in some degree, I don't know what criteria they use. We are, as of now, screening very carefully only in mothers with Graves' disease. But this hypothyroidism being very common, I was just wondering whether we should give a feedback to the sonologist. But I am told that you have to wait for too long a time, and the mother has to be turned various ways, and the baby has to, the neck of the baby is not that easy to screen, and maybe the visits for sonology will increase them. I was just wondering. This is just a offhand comment from what sir was mentioning.
Thank you.
I'm glad nobody asked me the dose of thyroxine that I used. As Dr. Wasner was saying, I had to scratch my head to remember what I did and so on. I'm glad nobody asked. But that particular person or mother was treated because of the rising antibody titers, as Dr. Madhavan also said, because it was rising and we didn't want more greater damage to be done to the fetus. And that is why the treatment was undertaken with a lot of precautions and a lot of difficulty in getting. But fortunately, we finally got IV T3 preparation. That was very lucky, I should say. Thank you.